Good evening, everyone. It's Wednesday the 1st of April, and the first reading of the Mass this morning told a story from the Old Testament from the book of Daniel. It was the story of how King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon had ordered 3 young Jewish men to be put to death, to be thrown into a fiery furnace. The 3 young men were Shadrach, Meshach and Abednego. And the reason that they suffered was because they refused to worship the false god that Nebuchadnezzar had erected before them. It's a reading that has a certain amount of fame because our readers are very often terrified of it because of the tongue-twisting nature of the 3 names, Shadrach, Meshach and Abednego. But it's a story that has a connection with the Mass that we celebrate every day, because at every Mass the priest at the offertory of the Mass says silently a little prayer that was part of the prayer that those 3 young men made in the time of their great trial. I'll read it out for you. The prayer is this: "With humble spirit and with contrite heart may we be accepted by you, O Lord. And may our sacrifice in your sight this day be pleasing to you, Lord God." You see, the background of the story is that Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, had invaded Judea. He'd seized Jerusalem and he deported a great part of the population to Babylon. Amongst the deportees were Daniel, whom the book of Daniel is named after, of course, and who was put into a lion's den, famously, but also these 3 young men. Being exiled from their homeland as Jews, of course they were far away from the temple, the only place in the world where the Jews could offer sacrifice to God. So this was the prayer that the 3 young men made. The prayer was, "We can't offer you any sacrifice as we ought. And so we ask you, God, be pleased with the sacrifice of our lives for you. We will give our lives for love of you, and may that sacrifice be pleasing in your sight." It's a very moving story, isn't it? A very beautiful prayer for them to have made, and it's a lovely prayer to have included in the sacrifice of the Mass that we make today. But it's also something that has a kind of resonance for us perhaps at this time, because in a way we are, all of us, in exile at the moment. We can't go to church. We can't offer the sacrifice of the Mass with the priest. The priest is offering the sacrifice of the Mass here, but we're deprived of it in some ways. But there is the possibility raised by this prayer that there is something we have to offer to God. We have our prayers to offer to him. But also, you remember, the older ones amongst you, I'm sure, how it used to be a commonplace in Catholic conversation when we were faced with various trials and difficulties to say, oh, well, let's offer it up. We can offer up our difficulties. We can offer up these hard times in our life to God as a little act of worship. Our religion isn't just about the things we receive from God, the prayers and graces that come down to us. It's also about what we give to God. And we can give to God these trials that are patiently borne. And when we do that, when you come to think about it, aren't we uniting ourselves in the best way possible with the greatest of all sacrifices, the sacrifice of the Son of God for us on the altar of the cross? On Sunday, we start the great week of the Church's year when we remember the sufferings of the Son of God, when we remember his sacrifice. And perhaps if we can offer up our own little trials and tribulations at this time, that might be a great way of us uniting ourselves with it. On Sunday, I'll post another one of these little talks for the beginning of Holy Week, for Palm Sunday. and then I'll be speaking to you again during the course of Holy Week. But until then, good evening, and God bless you all.